All right, so let me think about this. I think if you're watching it knowing, then it's not really anti-professional. Wait, it's not really anti-professional? Wait, hold up. It it's okay. Okay, I have a difficult time understanding that. So, some people like, is there precedence for uh people to push for like I don't understand anti-professionalism. Like it was deliberately looking to be amateurish. Like the person is trying to be dense but failing to be dense, or the person is trying to be an expert but failing to be an expert. See, here's my confusion from what I said earlier about intent. So if the intent is to capture someone's ignorance and they are delivering on ignorance, I how is that anti-professional? Because they managed to capture the ignorance. And then if it isn't, like they come off as very, very knowledgeable and endearing, but they were trying to be ignorant, then that almost feels like they failed in their intent. But here, the way you're describing it, like how people are against doctors recently cause big pharma. Yeah, but was that their intent to portray someone like that? And it sounds like it did. Like it almost seems like if this person's character turns out to be smart when they intended not to be, that's anti-professional. As in they fail to convey their intent. And undermine those types of, that's fine if that was the intent, is what I'm saying. Like I don't see how that's, oh, you mean against experts. You're talking about the character uh being against experts, as in portraying someone who ignores expert advice, who don't believe in expert advice, not professionalism as in like the job professionalism. That's kind of like just being ignorant. Yeah. So some people might watch it saying thinking that the character is ignorant, but that's true. So the person is being a professional about it. Like the show was deliberately intended to be that way, right? I'm getting the impression that this person is deliberately trying to be ignorant to, it's kind of like idiocracy, right? Those idiocracy or yeah, idiocracy, right? Where it's trying to portray someone. And that can be really emotional, I guess, because um it's kind of humorous. Here, bear with me. Here's a hot take. I can't organize this thought until I actually watch this show. Is this on Amazon? I really actually want to watch this show. Um, and it's on the viewer on how it's interpreted. It's on the viewer in how it empathizes with the either of the characters, right? So it is an emotional take. However, I when you said it depends on who watches it, it is professional if it elicits an emotional response. Is what I'm saying. Like you were talking about the context of being anti-professional, not the context of it saying the merits of the show. So for me, I was specifically talking about the merits of the show because the viewer doesn't have agency over the exposure of what the show is depicting. The creator does. I mean, with all the like the publication and stuff, like if Netflix approves and stuff. So No, it doesn't depend on the viewer what is going to go in the show, is what I'm saying, and what is intent of the show. You are concerned with how viewers react to the show. The same group? Oh, that checks out actually. That checks out quite a bit. Yeah, it definitely checks out with the writers of Black Mirror. So it's presenting, but here's the thing. I'm not when I was talking earlier, I'm not talking about whether viewers hate it or not or what they interpreted. I'm talking about the merits of the show. Like this person probably portrayed it well. It was probably even the intent of the writers to have viewers have different interpretations. In every way, that's a successful show, in my opinion. Like Black Mirror sparks deep thoughts. Like I know you're making a binary decision of saying what is constitutes as real or deep thought or profound thought, but any form of empathy and ignorance or emotional attachment creates thought because the writers, especially Black Mirror, creates controversy. They focus on controversy by painting a caricature or maybe an extreme situation. And it would fail as a show, in my opinion, if you if someone like you who's focused on the viewers would not say it depends. As in if it's a one-dimensional portrayal. Like for example, Black Mirror, when they the episodes of Black Mirror, they are ambivalent by nature. It promotes profound, deep thinking. If everyone laughed at the show, for example, like the vast majority of the audience say it doesn't depend, it only promotes one viewpoint, then the show is no longer provocative. Like it's not profound. It's one dimensional, right? So you gave me the impression that the show is up there because it is provocative. So yeah, I agree with you. The viewer's interpretation of the show will depend on the viewer's empathy. Or like, do they empathize with the ignorant person? Do they empathize with the context? Like, what kind of statement they're making? But that's coming from viewers that I don't resonate with. Basically, viewers that rarely ever read into, they're more concerned about their own feelings. But in a way, that is the intent of the writer. At least if they were the creators of Black Mirror, the intent is to have their viewership be split, like to have multiple meanings. Unlike, say, a show like a show that's ran with a very, very strong agenda in mind. Like, it's bad, like anything from Michael Moore, for example. I don't even know if he makes movies anymore, but Michael Moore is a classic example of you should feel this way. That's it. Like, this is my intent. This is my narrative. If you don't feel this way, it would, then I have failed, kind of thing. It like hand holding, right? I'm not sure. I'll check out the show for sure and give my thoughts about it. But I reckon it's more like Between Two Ferns, where they made a character, they acted out a caricature and set up a situation in which it creates a dynamics that makes a kind of a depiction of the entertainment. Like Between Two Ferns, he's a comedian, right? So they were trying to do something that resembles how comedy works, and it's a caricature of comedy. And this, I'm guessing, it deals with the interaction between an expert and low key the the person, like the internet culture, I guess. Maybe the character Philomena. I'm picturing it in my head, but I could be way off base because I don't know anything about this. But Philomena might be like like the placeholder person for the uninformed, and then it's juxtaposed to the informed person. But if I had to think about it, if I watch this show, I'm probably going to be empathizing with the informed and sympathizing with the uninformed. Um, since I usually am more focused on what it's trying to encapsulate as opposed to having a reflection on myself, right? The majority of individuals that you're highlighting possibly in a anti-professional way, like the anti-professional peeps, those are individuals who are probably sympathizing with self. Like they're not really outwardly focusing. They're only inwardly focusing how offensive it is to them or how concerned they are by the message that is passing out. It's one of those like things that I tell myself sometimes too. Like, am I upset because I'm upset for other people? So I get it. The whole anti-professional thing could fall into that pit hole where that pit where you are concerned about how this can fuel anti-professionalism. I don't think that word is a little confusing to me, so I will use the word uh like skepticism, but like emotional skepticism as opposed to or like ignorance. I feel like it's just emotional ignorance, emotionally conditioned ignorance. So if you don't want to believe in something, you don't have to believe the experts, right, that have the information. And that's fair. I that's fair. I anti-professionalism, unfortunately, I got a little confused and I started addressing something else. um Professionalism doesn't make you an expert. You can be a professional at sleeping and know nothing about sleeping. You just can be very regular and consistent with sleeping and be empathize with like the sleeping culture and whatnot. Um yeah, I personally, this is just my personal for my personal sanity. Um uh I define professionalism depending on the act and the intent of the product. And then expertise is what I use for those individuals who are very informed and like offer a mastery of something. Um, Someone can be very humbling and ignorant at the same time, but act like a professional. Um, Professionalism deals with proper empathy and standardization. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I mean there's a chance I could just come out of this watching that show feeling like the vast majority of people. I highly doubt it. There's always a chance. I really like Black Mirror, and I know quite a lot about the writers of Black Mirror. So that sounds like I didn't realize they were making a different show. That would explain the hiatus on Black Mirror. Uh, the whole TikTok thing though, and the snippets, to me, it's a whataboutism because that applies unanimously to everything. There are very few things that TikTok like snippets is not the can like most creative products are not immune to the situation. So, yes, I totally understand that concern. Unfortunately, for me, I place my faith in the creators. I think too much of our current society, I guess, our internet society, has become a deterrent. The whole idea of being taken out of context or confronting TikTok, Reddit, and subreddits, etc., has stunted creativity and the ability to communicate or portray things due to just a general lack of empathy and comprehension on intent. So, for me, I'm on the other side now, in my opinion. This one, I might particularly pick a side because I back creativity. I back individuals who are brave enough to create messages, as opposed to those like myself personally, cowered behind political correctness and trying to anticipate the inevitable disagreements that come from humanity. Like my inability to write and publish things that are controversial is the biggest obstacle for someone who believes they are well informed. And it's nice for me to see that there are people who are willing to take that risk. So, in no way am I not saying that's not happening. It's most definitely happening, where people take things out of context and use it and warp it to fuel their agendas. Absolutely. I actually found some that are kind of humorous, but also very sad. Like uh some of my favorite Hank and John stuff, they have to respond to stuff that is taken out of context. And they just run vlogs and whatnot. And it's casual speech. But even casual speech was subjected to it depends. Like, but not any of those counter arguments had anything to do with, or had very little indication that the people who are making that content or asserting that content had any empathy or understanding of the intent of the message. And that's kind of just the, I almost want to say it's the dogmatic current. If you think of it as a negative thing, it's the disposition that we are in. If you think of it as a positive thing, I don't know how you can think of it as a positive thing. I see it as it's kind of a realistic thing. So the idea that you can say it depends fuels that stuff already. Like that, we are the product of that. So in my mind, I constantly say it depends a lot. And the more I say it, the more I'm deterred from expressing anything. And it's kind of nice that there are shows. It's kind of ironic, actually, because Jeremy Clarkson and the others that I was mentioning are not shy of expression, and they wear their intent on their sleeve. So whether they draw criticism or not, they're pretty steadfast on their resolve. And even then, they are opened to accepting the consequences of publishing that stuff. I don't think viewers take that responsibility at all. They are free from that responsibility because they are the consumers. Agency is left in the consumer at the expense of the creators. Video games, movies, shows, they're it's our privilege to misuse that content. It's their sacrifice to offer it to us, in my opinion. Us, as in anyone who's outside of the creative process of a product. And you know, um, yeah, I guess. For me, if I had to say something about how I feel about the show that's being described, it doesn't depend on how I feel. I don't think rarely has a product ever depend on how I feel about it. Um, but I can't resonate with those people who say it depends on the viewer's perspective. The goal in when I watch something and consume something is to figure out what the creator is trying to tell me. And if I'm incorrect, then I would discuss with other people what the creator's intent is, not what how they feel about it. How what collaborate on what is the message they're trying to say. And it's kind of like I guess it's impersonal. It's very a lot more impersonal. But I will have my feelings for sure. So I can definitely say that I will probably have different feelings than others. However, it would be really awesome if we get back to a time where I'm not sure how normalized this is. Back in the day, right? Like you go to film school, or I go to a film class. We watch, say, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And then there will be an assignment. And you have a group project. And you get assigned 4 different people. So 5 people work together and say, hey guys, can we brainstorm? What do you think Alfred Hitchcock's intent was? And what this does is it removes the dependency, the variability. It's 5 people trying to gather and find a consensus as deep as they can on the intent of the creator. The intent of the creator is singular in nature. It may encompass a lot of perspectives. So I would say in this way, it demonstrates what I mean. The writers of Black Mirror who made that show intended that it be provocative and controversial. And so it no longer depends on the viewers because the viewers were meant to have sporadic um, opinions. So in a way, it is both, it does depend on the viewer to interpret the value and message of the show, but it was a singular intent that they achieved, probably having a comment like yours and probably what I'm brainstorming right now. It's like I can probably see that some people will have this and that and this. And to me, they achieved it. That is their singular intent. They try to be provocative. So, kind of like whataboutisms with Trump, right? Like Trump did the fake news thing, and that was the intent. It was a sole intent. And I think if 30 people sit in a room and they tried their best to find the most inclusive motivations, you're just saying that that's the type of show it is. Yeah, I see that you're saying that, and I'm evaluating it on it. A mockumentary? I'm not sure if I would have to watch it to know if it's a mockumentary or not. Maybe like a oh wait, does it is it like are you talking about like it's a Modern Family kind of thing? I don't know if you watch a Modern Family. I'm not sure if we have the same standards for mockumentaries. Uh, it's like asking if King Arthur came a lot. I see the joke, but I don't understand how that's relevant to a mockumentary. Oh, you mean the host asked that? Like they asked a joke. Like they made a pun. Like they would ask, I don't know, a expert in medieval fantasy writing. Okay. Well, I don't see that as a mockumentary. It's a comedy. I mean, a mockumentary could be a comedy, so it's both, I suppose. Uh, However, I'm not sure. Is there narration? I guess I'll find out. I have a very specific bare bottom line for what's considered mockumentary and what's considered a straight up comedy. Like Between Two Ferns is a straight up comedy. It's deadpan humor as well. Uh, I don't know if you watch that series or not, but that's literally, yeah, that's what he does. He does the same thing. Um, with actors and celebrities and political figures. A mockumentary is when it's documenting something that's happening, right? So like is it like National Geographic with puns in it that was presented to be profound but also absolutely tone deaf? I don't know. Like I can't, it's hard to describe, but it just sounds to me like it's like a talk show, but with comedy. It's a comedic talk show right now. So there's a host, the interviewer, who asks ignorant questions, and then there's an interviewee who answers them as best as they can, probably in a serious manner. Uh, the Yakuza, like what was mentioned in Yakuza. The straight man and I forgot what the other guy is, but the duo, it's like a duo comedy act. You got the straight person and the person who throws the uh uh the double act. Is it like set up with two people? Like a British deadpan humor comedy duo. Someone's giving it to you straight and then someone is making the jokes. Just watch it. I mean, that's fine. It's 5 episodes? Oh, that's pretty short. Are they like 40 episodes? I mean, I can't watch it right now. I don't have a Netflix subscription. Not yet. But I'm pretty sure I have a good idea of what it is now. But anyways, it doesn't break away from what I'm saying about describing a show personally. I mean, I get there's clips on YouTube and stuff you if you care. Yeah, I'll probably look at like trailers and clips probably from the same nature of TikToks and whatnot. However, I'm not entirely sure, in my opinion, that describing a show to someone based on how other people feel about it is very helpful, in my opinion. We'll see. I do want to watch did you watch the second season of Shadow and Bones? Uh, uh I guess Eric just saw the first season. Did it still feel like a I don't know if you were here about when Eric and I was discussing about what we thought about season 1, but I still stand by pretty much how I feel. I don't think going to season 2 I will probably deviate too much, but it's one of those like youth fantasy shows. I see. No cliffhangers that trigger your senses. I feel like when a show ends on a cliffhanger, you have some residual emotional response. I see. Yeah, Eric was sharing his take on it, and uh he and I share very uh similar interpretations of it. The production value is very high, and at least on season 1. I'm not sure about season 2, obviously, um, because I haven't seen it. Um, it's not like Avatar with calling it water benders, etc. I see. It's a youth fantasy. That's kind of how I described it, but I don't know. Eric didn't seem to resonate too much with the dramatic irony, the leaning on dramatic irony. Like, yeah, this is the bad guy. He was looking forward to something with more intrigue and world building, which uh I can see it's a little bit light on that for sure. At the same time, it's hard to ignore but the potential intended target audience of young adults. And young adults, if I had to take a guess, this person targeting young adult audience tend to sideline world building. So much like what you said about explaining some of the specific terms and whatnot, you think the plot was fairly strong? I agree. I agree. The plot is strong. I think the plot lacks world building or other, which is not part of the plot, if you know what I mean. Like world building and terms and stuff and details, I don't think they're part of the plot. Some plot holes in there, but sure. Yeah, there are plot holes. But what I mean is the thing you asked, right? It could have explained some of the specific terms. I think that's very resonating with Eric's sentiment that he was talking about. The show is not about focusing other than plot. It's a youth fantasy show that's targeted towards the younger audience, like a teenage audience. And I guess they decide to characterize youthful audience as one that cares a little bit less about world building, like the details of the world, and more just have an emotionally driven plot, like Star Wars versus Star Trek. the, the classic juxtaposition. Star Trek focuses predominantly on details, and the plot moves at a snail pace. You know, also given its format, it's a very, very long format show that the average show goes 7 seasons. Yeah, it's pretty bare bones. That's how I felt about it as well. But I absolutely love Eric's not as much into like having enough to excuse. He doesn't necessarily excuse lack of world building for like excuse it with high production value, but I'm kind of a sucker for high production value nowadays, since I've been looking at animation and editing and modern tech. So uh I think the high production value draw me to the show. Like I really like the visual effects, like the visual composition and the creative composition, the costume designs and all that. So he did say the show had really he liked the show's production value. But I don't think that's enough for him to excuse thin thin world building. You eventually get to understand that Shu is like Chinese. Oh, okay. And Ravka is more. Yeah, yeah. That's kind of what people theorize, right? Especially that one content creator that you linked. It was specifically you, I'm pretty sure. The one that talked about potentially how heavy-handed uh the what you call it, the quote unquote racism was portrayed. And yeah, it looks like I guess they stayed consistent with that and followed through. I really am going to start watching other subscription stuff soon. I'm just waiting for a particular uh thing so I can spend money. Not yet. I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of, what is the other show that oh wait. There's another show that I felt, oh, um HBO's, this is on HBO. The what is the Dark Material? His Dark Material. That's what it reminds me of. Like super high production value and things are happening, but the world is just so interesting. But they don't stop the plot to discuss the world. the plot keeps moving on. Like it just keeps going. But I'm really interested in, hey, can you like take a back seat and have it explain the geopolitical situation that is this world? Yeah, it's more character driven. And low key, Eric's not into that. In more recently, maybe it has generally been the case. Generally, more details, right? I want more details. Like if I had to pick, I have a slight favoritism towards non-character driven stuff. Like for example, if I was sit here and someone says, "You want to watch Star Wars or Star Trek?" I'll watch Star Trek. Star Trek is less character driven. Like most of the context is that the world imposes the situation and the details imposes on the character, and the character must respond to the details of the world, as opposed to the character makes the conflict. So like the character is the source of the conflict, which happens a lot with teen and young adult material because it focuses strictly. I like when it's like three groups. Yes, I heck throw in a fourth party. I mean, fictitious. Like, I'm sure you probably Yakuza, right? The game series. It's interesting whenever it gets really convoluted. In my opinion, like personally, I get interested because you're juggling, like a lot of people, a lot of conflicts, a lot of intrigue. That's kind of where Game of Thrones lost me too. I'm not sure if you watched all of like the HBO series, but the moment they ran out of material, that last season was completely character driven. And it was completely character driven by two characters. And that was it. So all of it was thrown out. All the intrigue, all the world, all the interconnected lines and the webs of interconnectedness, it just ended up being two characters. Like what happens to two characters. Daenerys and sorry, spoilers for Game of Thrones. I don't know if you really mind that, but it just ended up being about Daenerys and sort of about Jon Snow. But then Jon Snow was sidelined for a spin-off, which may come to HBO in the future. And so ended up it just was about Daenerys, and then like the one that's stopping Daenerys. And that was it. They just threw out everything for character driven Star Wars ending. Shouldn't be more than 3 in a movie. Oh, it was a movie? Oh, you mean wait, what? Wait. What movie are we talking about? But I agree, it shouldn't be too complicated in a movie. Have you seen The Departed? Oh, when it's not okay. Have you seen The Departed? Martin Scorsese has a really effective way of introducing intrigue. I mean, it's kind of like Yakuza, but um, like in Yakuza, I said like crime, right? Organized crime. The most some of the most stereotypical gold standards of having intrigue, jostling a lot of detail, like back and forth, between like interested parties. It's organized crime stuff, which Scorsese has pretty much branded himself as the world of that. I mean, he does do other things that have like two or three point of views, like The Wolf of Wall Street. It's still centered about one character, but the interest parties are constantly flowing in. It's still centered around one. Like Scorsese still does do those things, but he can interweave more interested parties in it at once. One of the classic things of like organized crime is that there are 3 or 4 party members, right? Someone's backstabbing someone who's probably in cahoots with another person, but that person probably will backstab the other person when their deal is done or something. Kind of like Monk in a way if it was not episodic, right? Monk is an episodic show, so it always generally feels like there's only 2 or 3 interested parties. Like a detective story, it tends to have a maximum of 3 interested parties in one episode if it's episodic. However, if you start delving into shows like Mine Hunters, which does have a level of deductive reasoning and whatnot, but it's serialized into an arc. It has 5 or 6 interesting parties, and those details about those interested parties create the world and circumstance around them. It creates like multiple perspectives, and I definitely for show like at least Shadow and Bones season 1, I like to see it expand, but it sounds like they're honing in on something. I'll have to talk about that later and we'll probably talk about it because Eric is and other things that Eric and I will probably talk about at some point. Sweet Tooth is that too. Sweet Tooth started with 3 interested parties. So the first season, it created 3 interested parties over the course of the. There's actually technically 3, and the world. The world is presenting the challenges to the 3 interested parties. So it is still character driven. It's first just 2 characters, and then they introduce the 3rd one, and then when they're traveling, the world instigates the problems that they have to circumvent, and that's how they're doing it. And unfortunately, I'll just give you a disclaimer: the first season ends with a cliffhanger, which introduces a 4th interested party, which is still the world technically. So what was interesting, in my opinion, originally about Walking Dead, right? The Walking Dead, before it became only a character driven show, was that in the beginning, the characters were constantly fighting against the world. The world was imposing new and newer obstacles on the characters until it didn't. Until like season 4 or 5, it was constantly the same conflict over and over again because it was completely character driven then. Like what's the next problem they have? Oh, they have trouble trusting each other. What's the next problem they're going to have? They have trouble trusting each other. It's just a different context. They just keep adding new context, but it all boils down to they have trouble trusting each other. And I have a very I'm cautiously optimistic that's not what happens to Shadow and Bones, where it's constantly the ignorance and insecurity of the characters that is the source of all the problems. Like the conflict, the resolution, it's constantly around the character's ignorance and naivety. Like, hopefully not, but I don't know. I hope it becomes more interesting. Like, there's an embodying something else, or politics thrown in or something. Obviously, that might be not the intent. I don't think it's the intent, actually, of the director. That's my own personal desires. But I do not think it would be out of character for the director who's basing their stuff on a youth teen fantasy series to incorporate dry politics and like distribution of power, and introduce the idea of what happens when certain people have access to this power and accessibility. How does that uh, destabilize the systems that are in place, like the kingdom of X and the kingdom of Y, the Shu versus the Ravka, like how does that destabilize all that stuff? Oh, wait. I recently saw a show. Oh yeah, it's Carnival Road. I don't know if you've seen Carnival Road, but the second season really broke it out a little bit more. It introduced more, like, but it's still running at a character's pace, like a sluggish pace, because it started shifting. A plot slows down when you have to start doing world building, right? It's kind of like Lord of the Rings effect. I call it the Peter Jackson effect, in my opinion, where the original trilogy spent more and more time adding the places and characterizing the places that the plot kind of gets extended, because you have to resolve those things. And uh Carnival Road, the first season, which is what Eric and I talked about today, he saw it and he said, like, it was okay. Like, I can hear some of his reservations. The second season, in my opinion, was far more interesting because it introduced why these things are happening. Like, why is this kingdom that they're in, this empire, is in charge, and they have like a parliamentary way of doing things, and like they keep talking about there's warring factions and all that stuff. So they ended up introducing counter governments in the show. Slight spoilers, but I won't tell you what type of government stuff. It's kind of like wait, Fictitious, have you seen Attack on Titans? It's still the bee's knees, but I haven't really seen the final, like, 3-part final season with the 2 movies. So you know how oh, I'm trying to think of moments like this. You can probably help. You probably have a lot more of these experiences. You know how when you're playing a game, like, let's just stick with video games. You know how no, this might be a terrible example, but the moment that I can think of is Final Fantasy VII, right? You play the game, you're like, oh yeah, we're getting through Midgar, and then we're getting out, and then the moment you hit the end of the Midgar stage, you realize, and now you start playing the game. Like, here is the rest of the world. For the brief moment, the brief, like, 15 hours of the game that you play, it's like 15 to 20 hours. In the first section of the game, you're like, oh yeah, so this is what's the game like. We're living in a slum. This is our whole world, right? Like, this is our world. We have a ceiling where there's MAKU energy anywhere. And then suddenly, when the game, that chapter ends, you've just realized that is 5% of the world. So your universe only occupied 5% momentarily, and you realize now, here's the rest of the world. It's kind of like What's another good? It's kind of like when you play a sandbox game or a open world game, but you're in the tutorial, right? And the tutorial, oh, a good one is Witcher 3 actually. You're in the White Marshes in Witcher 3 and you spend like 15 hours going like doing it, exploring the maps like, man, this map is pretty big. And the moment you end the tutorial, like you get out of White Marsh, it's called the tutorial region. You realize that White Marsh is like 5% of the rest of where you are. And that's kind of how I feel there's an opportunity here for shows like Shadow and Bones and stuff. And Attack on Titan does that like twice. And the last time I watched it, I'm not gonna spoil anything. It's just that's the type of moment. Like, oh, you've been doing all this, like all this stuff has been happening. It's like, what is going on? Like, what is the bigger picture? Like, I don't get how this is happening. It's like, well, you know what? All this time, and you just get slapped in the face. It's like, what? For real? And then they will spend the next like 6 episodes explaining, meanwhile, this is happening. Or meanwhile, this explains all these other things. Meanwhile, this is how all this stuff happened. Like this is why this character is in here. This is why the world is like this. And another example I can think of, especially from an anime, is the show 86. And I'm not going to spoil 86 either. It's just you're always stuck. They keep you in close. Oh wait, I know this is a bad example, fictitious. Don't at me. But Never Promised Land had that chance. You see what I mean? Like, you spent the whole season like, oh my gosh, they're like stuck in this. Their world is so small. You always see there's something outside. Promised Neverland, yeah. You never, you see that, right? And it literally became a Promised Neverland because season 2 apparently, I didn't even watch it, but apparently season 2 basically it's a Promised Neverland that never happened. Like, you know what I mean, right? Like, I know you've seen season 2 of Shadow and Bones. Just, you can hold on to your thoughts. But the moment I saw them cross the veil and just show that there is a moment, a breaking of the barrier, I was thinking, yo, this show could get huge, like gigantic. I felt similar expectation, like I felt a similar like excitement when I was watching the Badlands. I don't know if you've seen the Badlands. In fact, I don't even know if that show concluded. But after like season 1 or 2, like when the system started breaking down, everything started coming in. And then it started getting wonky in season 4 when like another interesting party just shows up and whatnot. It's why I like The Expanse too. Unfortunately, The Expanse technically got canceled early, but they were told early enough to give an ending, like a quote unquote an open-ended conclusion to The Expanse. But it's every single time you're just like, in the beginning you start humbly, right? It's about space people arguing with earthers, like people who are born in Earth, and then there's a conflict, but then it got bigger. Like now the conflict is not just about that, it's about Mars. And then there's like a looming alien threat, and it just kept going. Like the thing just kept getting bigger and bigger to the point where it didn't seem like the show had a reasonable way of ending anytime soon. And well, let's just say shows like that are not very trendy. They tend to cost a lot of money and typically get canceled before their vision gets realized. But I love those shows. I love shows that are so wide, so big, and but intimate at the same time. What I mean by that is you focus on the conflicts of a small group, but the bigger picture is ever present in the small group. To demonstrate the scale of someone's conflict is to juxtapose, in my opinion, to juxtapose the small, intimate conflicts of the day to day in the grand scheme of the larger universe. And Eric and I felt that Star Wars Andor knocked that out of the park. Just the idea that, oh yeah, it's scrappy, it's intimate, like this is a solo conflict, but you are constantly made aware, knowing the legacy and the universe that the Star Wars in, it's in a really big universe. And that universe has so many things, but at the same time, these people are just worried about their own thing right now. It's not so the character's ignorance and like the how much a character knows is with respect to how much they should or would know from the viewer's perspective. And that creates great dramatic irony, in my opinion. Not the whole, in my opinion, the superficial stuff where, oh, this guy, he's a sleazebag, but I know he's a sleazebag, but this character doesn't. And how long is this character gonna keep trusting this person until the ultimate betrayal will inevitably happen? Because you, as the viewer, know it, right? You're the omnipotent person. You're the person that knows that, oh, this. It's kind of like having a detective story, and you already know the killer, right? And now you're interested in the process. How is the killer going to be outed by your hero, kind of thing? So it's very straightforward in the sense that it's Harry Potter, it's the Hunger Games, like you know the contestants, and you know the inevitable outcome. The idea is, how is it going to happen? And that's a plot, character-driven plot. That's fair enough. Like Darth Vader, we know Darth Vader. We know Skywalkers, right? How is it even going to happen? I mean, we know what's going to happen, and we know what the film time is. Like, no, there isn't going to be like another quote-unquote Skywalker family just randomly popping in. It's like, oh, we're not Skywalkers, we're, I don't know, spacewalkers or something, and it becomes a third party attack on it. It's pretty much why I really like Cowboy Bebop when it comes to sci-fi. Cowboy Bebop, you have what? You technically have 4 characters, right? So there's 4 interesting parties, and they are interested in completely different things. Spike, crap, I forgot his name. Edward and Faye, and then you can throw in Ian, but Ian's the corgi. So they have 4 completely different agendas, but their opportunities and their world introduce a 5th interesting party, and that interested party dictated how all 4 reacts to that, as opposed to the other way around. So instead of seeing one driven reaction, which Shadow and Bones tend to take, like Western audience tend to take a lot, instead of having the circumstances define the characterization, you have the characters define the circumstances. So like if this character says, I'm doing the right thing, you're just gonna have to accept that they're doing the right thing, as opposed to the world saying this is wrong. For example, like in Shadow and Bones, you could say, well, it's not up to this person, it's up to the system, the hierarchy, the political system, what you can and cannot do. Instead, it's this character is the hero. So this hero will eventually come out on top, but still feel emotionally ambivalent. But it would be within their merits, as opposed to some really sucky things like from Japan and stuff where, well, this is a guy who's gonna get the bone, like because the system is working against this guy. The guy is going to try its best to respond to the system, but you are sitting at the edge of your seat, knowing that this guy can fail because the system is stronger. You don't have the luxury of plot armor in this case. And that's kind of the harsh uh duality of it. You you could be invested in characters in a character driven show if you're someone who loves to see characters evolve, or maybe keep characters around, or you vibe with characters emotionally, then Shadow and Bones like knocks it out of the park. Like it's okay. But for me, I think those are a dime in a dozen. While shows, what's a good show that just, I mean, heck, me, son, and Coffers is watching this series that is kind of okay, but it kind of embraces like the Shakespearean tragedy a lot more than other anime, and maybe not the greatest execution. But one thing to say about anime is when you have certain characters with plot armor, other characters that seemingly might have plot armor don't have plot armor. So whenever I ever feel compelled and say that so often, it makes things inconsequential. And Shadow and Bones had a setup, a really interesting premise that makes endangerment for the characters. But as you continue watching, or as I continue watching it, it seemed like it flowed more like, hey, Harry Potter's going to make it to the end of Harry Potter. If you know what I mean. And maybe near the very end or a pivotal point, one of the characters might not be there anymore, or might like left or something. That's fair. But I have yet to see a show in a long while now where the world is the thing they're living in, not the characters are the universe and the world revolves around the characters. Uh just as much as I'm having this conversation about my opinions about what is trending and what is called this and that, I don't expect people to revolve their opinions around me. I contribute to a pool of opinions. I contribute to a incredible maelstrom of different perspectives. And therefore we can say it depends, right? And I hope the show evolves into something like that, in my opinion. Like I would love to have a show where clearly there isn't a right or wrong. Do we feel that way? I'm not sure if I feel that way even after season 1. There's clearly a right and wrong right now after season 1. Star Trek rarely ever makes you feel that way. Like, are we doing it? They're always asking, are what we do is what the characters doing in the full extent of selfishness or their own principles, or a lack of understanding, or both, or neither, and it's like a something way outside of their comprehension. Like, there are episodes where the characters live the experience but could not comprehend the experience. That's also a possibility, and that's kind of neat in my opinion. Like, that's really neat. Like having a long-winded discussion and then allowing the viewers to determine what the significance of that discussion is. Kind of like that the way Black Mirror does it. Black Mirror is a great one where, hey, we're gonna make this. What do you think it means? And the challenge was to really figure out all the things they want. Like the joy, in my opinion, of being a creator is to create a product that deliberately get interpreted in many different ways, as many as possible. In fact, some of my, when I was younger, some of my favorite stories are coming of age stories. And coming of age stories is called that, at least in my impression, it's called that, is that it is applicable to everyone. So it doesn't depend on if the person, it doesn't depend if the person's going to have an experience. They will have an experience. Now the story, but the interpretation of that experience will be myriad. It will be applicable to anyone. Like, people have a coming of age. It's part of the human condition. They have a coming of age experience. So it becomes applicable to, these stories become applicable to everyone, or a very large audience. But the entire large audience has a different interpretation of what that means, the coming of age story means to them. Or like poetry. Poetry is a great example. Like Robert Frost's, I think it's Robert Frost. I hope it's Robert Frost. Like the fork in the road. Like, what does the fork in the road mean to you, right? He characterizes it with poetry. Characterized like the road. No, sorry, not the fork in the road. The road less traveled. I'm being a Pepega now. It's called the road less traveled, and I really hope it's Robert Frost. But hang on, let me double check. It might be Elizabeth. Man? I'm so uncultured now. Hold up. It's not, probably. It's Scott Peck. No, wait. It's not Scott Peck. No. Oh yeah, it is Robert Frost. Oh, thank goodness. I was so worried. Yeah, the poem, The Road, sorry, it's called The Road Not Taken. Oh my gosh, it's the wrong title. Okay, it's called The Road Not Taken. I'm sorry. It's a narrative poem by Robert Frost in 1915. Bad with names. I'm so out. So it's called The Road Not Taken, and that can be interpreted in so many different ways. But what is great about his poem is that everyone will have an experience with the poem. So when they read the poem, they will have an interpretation of it. And that was the intent of the creator. So we could sit here for years and just discuss among ourselves what the intent of the creator was. But the one thing we can agree on is the intent was to mean different things to everyone else. So it doesn't depend on the viewers, because we will never know that person's intent, probably. But the thing is, they wrote something so that it can have lots of meanings, which is great. And I'm not sure if I have, and that's what I mean by profoundness. When a piece of work or creative artwork, if it is profound, it connects and resonates with many people, like almost everyone. And profound things to me are human condition things, because the human condition is relevant to any human being, which that's great. So when you do human condition, Black Mirror people does human condition, like that's their jam, right? It's human condition. It's going to be relevant to everyone. So their intent is to create an impression of the human condition in which everyone has an opinion on it. And that's fantastic. That's the stuff that I like. That's the profound stuff, entertainment that I love. And I hope Shadow and Bones kind of do something like that. I do like what they were setting up with like Shu and Ravka and stuff. It creates a platform for very, very profound thoughts and discussions. However, a big majority of it still felt like character-driven stuff. And when it becomes character-driven, you have people who empathize with it and people who don't, right? So say if you're not Chinese or Russian, you're probably even less likely to have deep thoughts or emotional empathy with them, or something that elicit different interpretations. You have the not and the yes, and that limits how profound a piece of artwork, a piece of creative thing is for. So the way to make it interesting to me in these types of scenarios is that, what is the author trying to say about, I guess, racism and stuff? What are they trying to say with their piece? That is far more interesting than if I lacked empathy, which is, to me, how video game people, how gamers are treating, in my opinion, are grossly treating developers and publishers. It's like, how do I feel about this game? Well, I can't relate to the game, so it sucks. It shouldn't be made. It's not in existence. That's kind of the narrative. I mean, that was a slightly hyperbolic, but sometimes I feel like I even am conservative about what I just said. Like, with video games, right? Video games are inherently character driven. In fact, the most popular video game gives a character a blank slate to represent yourself. You are the character. It is a character driven game because you are the character. And since you can only empathize or selfishly and egotistically revolve around yourself, it's difficult to empathize with what the developer wants to involve you in. So you have become the Star Wars Luke Skywalker. You are Luke Skywalker, and the universe revolves around you. So if the game doesn't cater to you, then it failed in its intent. Or you think it failed in its intent. So, hey, this game doesn't feel as good as I want it. I am the main character of this game. So it should feel good because I am the center of the universe of this game. Everything should be catered, and that's reasonable. That's the expectation of someone who is not concerned with the intent of the creator, which is the world. The creator created the world to allow you to experience the world. So if you view it in that way, like myself, I'm no longer the main character. I am someone who is living in a universe far smaller than myself. Far larger than just myself. The developer has created a world that have many, many smaller gamers playing their world, and their world is creating experiences for the gamer, and I am one of those many, many gamers. So not only am I not the main character, there are millions of me playing for the main characters in the game, and those are the developers that are creating the world that you are playing. So all those players are no longer the main characters. They are the supporting character. Well, they're just characters. At least that's a counter perspective. It's gonna be somewhere in between, obviously. Like, sometimes you feel like the main character, sometimes you don't. Like, for example, when do you not feel like the main character in the video game? When a boss slaps you in the face and you can't do anything about it. That's when you get that initial hit of you're not the main character. But then you learn the boss and you crush the boss's face in. Now you feel like a main character. But here's a great balance. Roguelike games, in my opinion, roguelike games are a great balance between this, right? Hey, you just got 6 really, really terrible boons. You are going to inevitably suffer and possibly inevitably lose. You are no longer, you are kind of the main character because you made the decisions, but you are also kind of not the main character because you're destined to lose or fight an uphill battle. And that's great. So happenstance and randomness creates less main character feel, in my opinion. So things don't always work out. You know, when you want the entire ending, well, you can't have the entire ending. You aren't the main character. The world is. And that's kind of a really terribly abstract digression from the perspectives when evaluating and describing other people's work of art, in my opinion. Uh, and we should discuss that next time. I should write that down. Maybe that'll be the discussion for oh wait, for next Sunday because Eric's gonna be away on Wednesday. He's going to a 40K thing. No, he's going for to a miniature hobby thing. I'm looking forward to hearing his experiences with that. Speaking of 40K stuff, right? Anyways, that's a pretty decent digression. I, in all honesty, didn't have anything prepared today. So thanks, Fictitious, for sharing and being the sacrificial peanut gallery for inspiration. Recently, in the last couple of days, I was doing some other tasks and did not have the, I guess, the motivation to come up with topics. I do have a lot to watch, but I'm basically waiting for some stuff to come in, so then I can like catch up on other media. I'm still watching Monk though. Still watching Monk. I have a lot to say about Monk, but I think you are the only person that's ever mentioned to anyone. I don't think I know anyone else that's seen Monk. All right. Okay, with that said, I hope everyone's had a great weekend, right? And good luck. Good luck with everything. Stay safe, stay healthy. Try to stay social and happy. And I'll catch everyone on the next one. Take care. Bye now.